So I'm in the back garden today and it's time for a sowing and growing video for September. All the details of everything I'm going to talk about are in the description below. Everything that I've sown very early in the month has been planted out now, so I'm really happy with all of that. I really like to get things out in the ground as quickly as possible, and at this time of year it takes me between about 14 and 20 days, depending on what I'm growing, to get them out into the ground. All the later sowings are actually behind me on this bench, and I'll just quickly pop a quick video up of those so you can see the sort of progress that I've got. All the details of everything that I'm sowing, as I said, are in the description below. There's a link to the database that I'll pop up on this screen occasionally as I go through. So if I'm looking down, I'm looking at my laptop. So first up are Stir On and White Lisbon spring onions. Now Stir On is a bunching onion, so we grow that as a dual purpose. If we end up having too many spring onions, we'll leave some of the Stir On in the ground and let them bulb up, and then harvest those in the sort of period July through to August. We have got dedicated overwintering onions, but those have all been sown now and those are tough ball, and in fact a lot of those are in the ground. So next up is a variety of different types of chard. So I'm going to do bright lights probably, and rhubarb chard or rainbow or something like that, whatever seed packets happen to have. I'm only going to grow those in the polytunnel for baby leaves, so lots of people have recommended that for the salad mixes, and yeah, so I'm going to give those a try. They're certainly going to add some nice colour to the salads, which tend to be a bit green over winter. So I've never really tried chard in salad mixes before, so anyway, I'm quite interested to try that because it's super healthy and it, as I say, it looks beautiful. So next up on the list is the first sowing of the winter lettuces. So these are going to go in a mixture of different environments: polytunnels, low tunnels, coal frames and things like that. All the lettuces really that I'm doing at this time of year will go under cover, and they will survive outside, but it's really about harvest volumes for me. I need to harvest a lot of salad every week, probably in the region of, let me have a think, 15 to 30 litres of salad, something like that, to feed the whole family and a few friends. And that's a lot of salad, so we need to be harvesting it consistently week after week after week all the way through the year. Up until about May, really, when the next year's salads are available. And to get that kind of sustained harvest rate, they really need to be under cover where they're not exposed to as much wind, and they get the correct hydration levels and a little bit of daytime warmth. It doesn't really matter about nighttime warmth so much, but daytime warmth is really valuable for them. So lots of different salads: Grenoble red, lots of Italian Rollo types, things like that. And scroll down, yeah, so that's the first batch of salads. I'm doing 3 successions of salads this year in an attempt not to have too much of a glut in sort of late October, November time, and then a sort of famine in December. So I'm trying to get a nice continuity. We always harvest cut and come again over winter, but this year we're going to try one variety, and that is, I'll come to it anyway, Brighton, and we're going to harvest that as a cut lettuce. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I've never really had a great experience with cut lettuces at that time of year. I find it quite hard to keep the quality of the lettuce high when I'm not removing the outer leaves all the way through winter. But anyway, we'll see. Next up is the spinach. So my favourite by far is Giant Winter. We grow that again under cover, mainly in the coal frames. We find it does really nicely in the coal frames. It doesn't really need the extra warmth of a low tunnel, and it definitely doesn't need the extra warmth of a polytunnel. We find it just does brilliantly though in the coal frames. Now there's a massive difference between a coal frame and outside. we worked it out last year. We did an experiment where we had one bed outside and we had about 4 beds or something under coal frames. The ones under coal frames we took 20 harvests off, and the ones outside we took 1.5 harvests off in the same period. So that's a pretty radical difference between the two. And actually the one outside was under fleece as well. So that's the difference that polythene makes compared to fleece in the middle of winter. So next up is radish and turnips. So we tend to do half a tray of radishes, different descriptions, and half a tray of Tokyo cross turnips. And we pretty much try to interplant those. We don't have any dedicated beds for radishes and turnips, but we find that at this time of year there's a lot of stuff that we're putting in that's not really going to use the whole bed for quite a long period of time. And so, you know, with these quick cropping things, especially radish is really quick, Tokyo cross turnips are not quite as quick, but also they, you know, if they put on a lot of growth and they mature, they will hold at this time of year. Well, by the time we're harvesting these, it'll be October, November. They'll hold in the ground really well, so we'll tend to still be picking them into December time. Maybe not the radish, but definitely the turnips. So what else? Field bean shoots. Now, normally I do my field beans in October. If I find any space though, and I might, because I'm clearing some strawberries in the back garden, I might put them in a little bit earlier. I'm trying to get really good roots. Now, somebody last year said, plant them deeper, Steve. So normally I plant them as per the instructions on the packets, which is about 2 inches deep. Now, they planted them 4 inches deep. Obviously, they take longer to get up, but when they do break surface, their roots are really deep down, and you know, so the plants are really well established and much stronger. Now, the way that I harvest field beans is I take the tips off them when they're about this big, and then wait for another tip to come to grow, and I'll take that tip off, and obviously I'm leaving a couple of tips just so that the plant's got some vigor. And so the kind of way that they're harvesting, you can imagine this, say a bean, when you take the first tip off, will throw up 3 or 4 shoots. So you harvest 1 shoot 1 week, then leave it a week, then harvest the second shoot, then leave it a week, then harvest the third shoot, and then by then it will have thrown up some more shoots. Now, you can do that in November, and you can do that in sort of late February. You can't do it in the middle of winter, so you have to have enough to slow the harvest rate down. And in winter you might be harvesting 1 shoot every 3 weeks or something like that. They do grow a lot slower in winter. Anyway, all of that's about an experiment basically this year to plant deeper, get more established plants a little bit earlier on in the season, so they're stronger, so that I can harvest more of those shoots in the middle of winter. So that's what I'm trying. We'll see how it goes. So what's next? Okay, so the next one is Calabrese. I do marathon, and cauliflowers, and I do snowball. And I start those off now and in October, and under grow lights in late November, not in December, in late November. So I've got 3 successions of those, and then they come ready next year in succession. So the way I do those is obviously start those in modules, pot those on into a bigger pot, maybe pot them into an even bigger pot later on in the year, and then I try and plant them out into my beds in the polytunnel or coal frames or low tunnels as space comes available. Now, sometimes space comes available because a crop fails, and sometimes space comes available because I planned for it to be available, and it doesn't really matter which. It means that I've got these plants that we really love and really appreciate in the hungry gap. So that is really late April through to very early June. So I want them coming available in that time period. And I don't want them all at the same time, hence doing those 3 successions. Now, even though the successions are separated by quite a long time, so I might do, as I say, one in late September, one in middle of October and then another one in November, so there's maybe a 2-month separation, they'll probably actually come to maturity only 2 or 3 weeks apart in spring. Now the way I plant those out is in the polytunnel especially, I will interplant them into gaps that I make in the lettuce beds in the polytunnel. So I'll just harvest a lettuce, plant it, leave a lettuce in the ground, then every other lettuce basically I'm kind of harvesting, and I'm still growing the lettuces underneath the Calabrese and the cauliflower for as long as I can, until the Calabrese and cauliflower kind of overwhelm them. By that time it tends to be middle of March, and I don't need those lettuces in the polytunnel because the ones outside in the low tunnels and the coal frames, they are then in full production. And so it means that what I don't get is a gap in the polytunnel where I've got nothing growing, because I won't need that extra lettuce in March and April and early May before I plant my tomatoes and peppers and whatever I have in the polytunnel. So it's a really great way, I think, of getting a complete extra harvest out of the polytunnel of crops that are so welcome in the hungry gap. So that's the way I'm doing my brassicas. Now you can do the same sorts of things with something like a Romanesco cauliflower, but I find it gets more frost damage. So if you do get a lot of frosts, and most people in this country will be getting frosts in early spring, then Romanesco I find not quite so good. Cauliflower, snowball in particular, seems to be really great. I don't actually grow snowball any other time of the year, it's just for early spring that I grow it. So what else is on my list? Oh yeah, so then this is the main sowing of lettuces for the polytunnel, and I'm doing them in the middle of September this year. So I've done them earlier in the past, but this year I've got more lettuces outside and more in cold frames right now, so I won't need quite as much lettuce quite as early. As I say, I'm trying to avoid this massive glut of lettuce that we normally get, because lettuce planted a little bit later I find is a little bit healthier than lettuce planted earlier. So just that difference of 2 weeks in September can be the difference between the lettuces lasting over winter as strong, vigorous plants and succumbing to stem rot or something like that. So for me, in my conditions, in my polytunnel, about the 14th of September I think is probably the best time to plant them. So what am I planting? Brighton, Trento, Roxy, Outrageous, and not Navarra, and Grenoble Red. So Grenoble Red is by far the best, but I'd just like to have a bit of variety in the salad mixes. Now we will have some extra things in the salad mixes, salad rocket and things like that, but we don't really like the bitter tastes, so we do tend to stick to things that are a bit milder, and kind of the strongest taste that we'll have in our salad mixes is probably a red lettuce. So no chicories and things like that. We've grown chicories before, they're just not good enough for me, and they tend to get so many slugs in them because you leave a chicory often to heart up. So anyway, not for this year, unfortunately. And then another batch of Giant Winter. Now you could sow all your spinach at the same time. We again tend to stagger it a little bit, partly again to avoid that massive glut in late October and early November, but also because it staggers the time at which your spinach will go to seed in early spring. And so, we like that because then that gives us chance. As soon as we see the first batch, and that's a batch that I actually planted yesterday, so I sowed it 3 weeks ago, something like that. So that batch will go to seed first, And as soon as I start seeing that one go to seed, that's the time when I know I need to be getting my next lot of spinach sown, so that it's ready to take over from the last batch of spinach, which I'll probably do 1st of October or something like that. So anyway, this is my main sowing. So I'm going to do two 80 seeds in the middle of September. I'll do some more turnips. That'll be my last sowing of turnips, again middle of September, but bear in mind that they will hold well in the ground, so it's worth doing quite a lot of those, planting loads of them, letting them mature nice and slowly, and then harvesting them nice and slowly into early winter. And that I won't do any more radishes. I find that radishes are not doing great, and I don't worry really about not having radishes in winter, because what I do is I grow ochre, these beautiful little red and yellow tubers, and they're just better than radishes, to be honest, and they're so much better than a winter radish. They're so zesty and so crunchy and so beautiful to look at, and the quality of the tubers generally is so pristine, really. We're really happy not to be eating radish in December, January, February and early March. That's the ochre season for us, and then we'll switch back to radish in sort of late March, and that's when we'll be harvesting it from the polytunnel. And then I'll do another sowing of Brighton. You might not need to do that. I'm doing it because this is the first time I've sown Brighton. I don't really know what its time to maturity is in winter. I don't know how well it's going to hold as a head lettuce, because that's I'm intending to harvest Brighton as a full head from the polytunnel in January and early February, when lettuces are really in short supply. So having a few head lettuces to harvest is a real boon. But as I say, timings I'm kind of not quite sure about, so I'm going to do a few, just a small number each, try and get my timings locked down this year, and then next year we'll see what we do. And then I'll do another succession of the marathon and the snowball cauliflower. And so, as I say, that again, it's all about timings, so I get a nice successional harvest of those. And October will look pretty similar to September. It's just more successional sowings of things. So let me just show you what I've got behind me and all those nice little seedlings. So here's a quick look at my seedling bench. There's my little lamb's lettuce, spring onions. I think these are spring onions, these are white Lisbon. More spring onions, winter miner's lettuce, true lettuce, tatsoi and pak choi, red pak choi that is. More lamb's lettuce, stir on spring onions, or if I want to leave them, bunching onions, bulbing onions, and some more white Lisbon spring onions. So quite a lot of spring onions, but a few more to come. We eat a lot of spring onions every day. So I've got some spring cabbages here. Doing my spring cabbages a bit later this year because I found that I didn't need them last year, the earlier sowings, and they just tended to go to seed. So I'm doing them, as I say, a bit later. Hopefully they won't go to seed, and hopefully they'll come ready when I actually need them. And just a bit of salad rocket. And the only reason I've got my brassicas here under the grow lights is because just the number of pests that there are outside. So much whitefly, and obviously still plenty of cabbage whites. And I am doing just a few little collards here. I've got 3 different varieties there, and I've got 1 germinated there of the 4th variety. So I was hoping for 3, but unfortunately not. So there's no time like the present. I've just pricked that one out. So I've got Vates, Champion, what's that one? Collard Flash, and Morris, so 4 different types of collards. We really like loose leaf brassicas, and so collards seem to be a better fit for us than cabbages, hence trying out 4 varieties for this year. So if you want details of anything that's happened in previous months, then I recommend opening up my ebook, and there's a link to that in the description below, and go into the reference information section, and there you'll find a chapter for each month of the year. So if you take a look at August, for example, there you'll find information, sort of overview of all the tasks for the month, and then information on what we harvested in August, what we sowed in August, what we planted in August, tour videos for the garden and the allotment, harvest videos, and all of that. So everything that you need really to catch up on the previous month. So there you go. I hope you could follow that ramble, but that is basically what I'm sowing, and all the seedlings that I've not got planted yet for September. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.